All right, moving on to the records. Al de Milo. I'm not good at pronouncing this. He's a Spanish guitar player. Not a lot can be said about him because I don't really think he's all that great. He comes from the 70s and 80s. He's kind of a cliche player. When I say Spanish, I mean it's literal Spanish. It's not Latin. It's from the other side of the pond. But, it's just some kind of deal on Colombia. It's got a good sleeve to it. I should probably repurpose that sleeve somewhere else. I remember picking this up extremely cheap, like for a couple cents. I think I went there on my lunch break one day. I went to a thrift shop on my lunch break one day, and they were just kind of giving this stuff away. That was years ago. I don't remember what this sounds like. It says special mixes. I can't say a whole lot about it. I'm glad I have it because I paid so little for it. This is a seminal album in progressive rock. It's King Crimson, In the Court of the Crimson King. If you don't know what this is, I mean, it's just super, super popular. I was watching a movie the other day and they had this picture. Somebody had spray painted on a wall somewhere. I wish I could remember the name of the movie. But it's a really good album. It's extremely good. It's supposed to be, if not the greatest progressive rock album of all time. It's supposed to be in that top 5 realm. It's on Atlantic. This version is on Atlantic. I can't remember exactly what record label they originally landed on, and this may be some kind of reissue. I don't know. I wish I knew more about. I know a lot about this band actually. I wish I knew more about the pressings and all that. I only got a couple of other things on record, and this was a library record. You can see wherever I picked it up from, somebody was checking this out in this is a good little landmark right here, but somebody had first checked this out in 1978 all the way up to 1985. You can imagine it's somewhat beat, but I love relics like this. I really do. And I think that this is a really, really good album. I think it is slightly overrated. Their first 4 albums while they were together, and then, they had people come in and out on those first 4 albums. And then after that, they repurposed, a few years later, they came back together, repurposed themselves with a whole new band. And out of those 4 records, I think most people think In the Court of the Crimson King is the best. Then the second best is the second album. The third best is the third album. The fourth best is the fourth album. I think I'll go backwards with that. I think I like Islands better than Lizard. Maybe Islands and Lizard I might flip-flop. And then The Wake of Poseidon. Then In the Court of the Crimson King. I think that the first and last song on this, the first song being 21st Century Schizoid Man, and the last song being the title track, In the Court of the Crimson King, I think are overdone. I don't think they're as good as they could be. Now, the 3 in the middle are great. I Talk to the Wind, Epitaph, and Moonchild. Yeah, those songs or even though they're not nearly as heavy and they are all kind of very low-key songs, I think they are just super epic. But like I say, I go backwards with it. This, if you haven't heard of this album, you have to check it out because of what it represents, what it is. 1969, pretty much so the birth of progressive rock. It's that important of an album. This is Crocus Bedside Radio. I don't know. This is a 45 RPM single. Crocus I like. I'm trying to think of what couple albums they did that I like. They sound a lot like they are a ZZ Top clone. Not a ZZ Top clone, but an AC/DC clone. They are good. They're not great, and they sound like they are trying to sound like AC/DC. They had several albums. Their first 2 or 3 albums, I haven't heard them in years, but they are pretty good. They are hard rock, blues, kind of bluesy, but not too bluesy. Not enough to where it's a turnoff. And I assume they came off of this album. This is probably like their 4th or 5th album or something like that. 2 Cars Crashing. Can't remember the name of it. I could read it at the bottom, but don't have my glasses on and I don't have that great of eyesight. Crocus is good, not great. This is an exceptional heavy metal band. This is almost, you could say, the birth of heavy metal. Now, this album is more poppy than most, but the first 3 or 4 albums, Fast as a Shark, or no, Reckless and Wild, which the first song on that is Fast as a Shark, was probably one of the first thrash songs of all time. The album Balls to the Wall. I can't remember exactly what the first, Breaker, I think is the name of their first album, but they are an exceptionally good band. This is one of their worst albums. It's not terrible. It's just an attempt to get onto MTV and rock and roll radio and things like that and repurpose themselves. It's not all that great of an album cover. It's not all that great of an album, but at the same time, it's not terrible either. It's just not, those ones that they first did were almost masterpieces. I mean, they were that good. And their Udo Dirksider, their singer, he was a very recognizable singer. He was I don't know how to describe him. He had a lot of energy. I guess he kind of sounded like Bon Scott, but he was full of energy, sounded really good. He sounded really good for many years, except his found new singers and brought them back in. I don't know if Udo ever came back, but even some of his solo stuff is really good. And to me, except is those first 4 or 5 albums, especially those first 3, with Reckless and Wild probably being the best one. Balls to the Wall is good. I'm missing one. I can't think of another one that I really like, but there's another album by them I really like, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. Smooth Jazz, Grover Washington. It's not Prestige. It's not Blue Note. It's just smooth jazz. Is it good? Is it bad? It's okay. Here's another with John. This is an ECM. I'm sure this is an ECM. No, it's a CBS, but it's an ECM type deal where it's got 3 players that are all guitar players. John McLaughlin. Let's show you the back. John McLaughlin was a player for Mahavishnu Orchestra, and he did a lot of stuff for ECM. Al DeMilo, like I showed you earlier, and this is one Paco de Lucia. I've heard a lot of his music, but it's been so many years. But I like him a lot more than I like Al DeMio. And John McLaughlin is something else. If you're in the mood, he's progressive. He does a lot of stuff. He's eclectic, kind of like Alan Holdsworth. He's not nearly as good as Alan Holdsworth, which I mentioned earlier. Or actually, I mentioned him in the video right before this. But John McLaughlin's good. He's really good. If I'm in the mood for him, I like to listen to him. Not always in the mood. RayParker Jr., this is Ghostbusters. I think I got 2 copies of this. I have one that is, I have one that actually has the original cover that's not, actually no, I have the complete album. I picked this up at Goodwill or whatnot, but I'm glad to have it. He was sued for RayParker was sued by Huey Lewis and the News because it copied the song, according to them, I Want a Brand New Drug. They settled out of court, and there's a documentary on Netflix called, or is it on Amazon? No, it's on Netflix, and it may not be there anymore. And when I think of the name of it, I'll tell you guys before the end of this video because it will come to me. But it's a video, Hired Guns is the name of it. And one of the ones that they talk about is they pulled this guy in, it's got like Alice Cooper on it, players for John Mellencamp, and they just talk about all these session musicians. But RayParker Jr. was a session musician. They called him in to come up with something. They said, hey, we'll give you $50,000 just to come up with a song, whether we like it or not. We'll pay you $50,000. And they paid him. This is the song he came up with. It was a hit. It made a music video. The movie was immensely popular. I think it was one of the top grossing films of that year, 1984. I think it was number 2. And he became popular once again. He was in his mid-30s or whatnot, and he was kind of popular at one time, and then he came back around. Chico Farrell, don't know much about this album. He's a tenor sax player, obviously, because he's holding a tenor sax. It's probably in the same vein of that Grover Washington, just kind of really smooth jazz. Michael Jackson, Billie Jean, can't say much about that. It's on Epic Records. Glad to have it. Like Michael Jackson a lot, like Billie Jean a lot. I remember listening to that song when I was a kid in my parents' bedroom or my dad's bedroom. This is Kano. Don't know anything about it. Picked it up probably with the batch. I think I picked it up with the batch with that first one I saw you, and I probably paid like 10 cents for it. Top Gun, music from the motion picture soundtrack. The song by Berlin, Take My Breath Away. I love that song. This movie is very sexist and misogynistic. Not a big fan. If 2, I showed you If 1 yesterday. I was so glad to get a hold of these. They are what Chicago should have been. Chicago's a good band, but If really was they were terrific. They did what Chicago should have done. They had horn section and all that, and they just, you know, this is an undiscovered gem, and you can find this very easily. I don't, you know, for whatever reason, maybe Chicago made them popular, but for whatever reason, this is an undiscovered gem. Bam! Let's keep going. Japan. Love Japan. This is